Nick, very good to see you. We start with an important question. What is a good monthly retirement income? And I want to throw some data at you first. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average annual expenses for people 65 plus in 2021 was 52,000, which comes out to about $4,000 a month. But of course, no two people are alike. So figuring out how much money you will need in retirement is very much going to depend on your own unique goals. But we do have some prompts to help people reach their own specific number. The first one, Nick, you need to picture your ideal retirement and be as specific as possible.
Right. So, we work our entire lives to get to this point, to get to retirement. And
Absolutely.
at this point in time, we're not necessarily looking for, hey, what our standard of living is up here while we're in our working years. And we really want to back that off just so that we can get to retirement. We want to
Mhm.
maintain, that same standard of living, and we want to enjoy retirement. And retirement's unique for everybody. It's different in the sense of, some people want to retire completely and go enjoy the beach life, and some people want to continue to work into retirement. You've got to identify your ideal retirement, and then all of a sudden we can start to work in, okay, how's the financials going to work for this? Are you going to be able to afford to do what you want to do in retirement at that point? And
Mhm, mhm,
everybody's unique. I mean,
mhm.
you could have a sibling or you have a twin sibling, that everything is the same in that sense, except for the way that your standard of living is. Over the years, you've developed that standard of living to match you, not to match everybody else.
Right. Yep. Everybody's ideal retirement is going to cost something different.
Yep.
Next, you do need to know what you're spending now. So track your expenses and create a spending plan.
Right. So that's, I always talk about three different sheets that people need to come up with in retirement. And that expense one is the worst one. Nobody
It's no
wants to
fun.
figure out, how much they're spending on coffee, how much they're spending on gas and so forth. But it is very important. And you've got to do it. I'm not saying track it down to the individual penny. We understand how boring that is. There's a lot of apps out there that'll help you, to do this type of stuff. But overall, you want to have a general idea of, hey, I'm spending $3,000 a month. I'm spending 8,000, whatever that number is. We've got to be able to drill that down to have a good idea. And I always tell people to track it on a quarterly basis. Sit down once a year, pull in those credit card statements, pull in those bank accounts. Usually, if you do it just once a year for a quarter, you're a lot less likely to get burnout over time with it. If you do it all year long, you get into that next year, people get bored with it and they don't want to do it again.
Mhm, mhm.
But once you understand what that expense is, now all of a sudden you can look at, okay, here's my income statement. Here's how much I'm pulling in from pension and Social Security. And then where's that gap? And then we go to the balance sheet. We look at 401ks and IRAs and bank accounts and so forth. And how do we bridge that gap to match up with our standard of living or with our expense sheet?
Right. Next, you have to consider common risk factors, including inflation, longevity, and changes to Social Security.
Yep. So we always look at retirement in basically three different phases. In those early years, you want to travel, you want to go, you want to get out, and doing that kind of stuff costs money.
Mhm.
Then all of a sudden you move into this slow go phase, and you're not traveling near as much, but you also don't have the healthcare expenses. And then that longevity phase comes in during those no go years. If we live longer, are we going to outlive our money in retirement? And that's a big issue. Obviously we're going through an inflationary period these last couple of years. Everybody's feeling it at the grocery stores, at this point in time. Is that something that's going to slow down? We're going to go through phases of this where we have high inflation and, phases like we've had, several years before that
Yeah.
of, slow inflation to even no inflation, at all. So it's going to go through its ebbs and flows there. And then the last
Right.
point that you brought up there with Social Security, we don't know. Nobody knows, what the health and the status of Social Security is going to be. Yeah, we can predict that out over the next couple of years, but what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the road?
Right. Right. Right.
The government's going to change their mind
Of course.
constantly. So,
Yeah.
we've got to be able to adapt to that.
Right. You can't say, oh, I need $1,000 on week one of retirement and $1,000 week 1,000 of
Right.
retirement. We
Yep.
wish it could
It's
work
going to
that
be
way.
different.
Next, of course, you say build a robust nest egg, but you also say that nest egg needs to be tax diversified. Why is that?
Right. So we always talk about, diversifying your assets, equities and bonds and cash and so forth. But we also talk about tax diversifying your assets, because one thing that we know for sure is going to happen is change. And they're going to consistently change the tax code. Now, if you're an optimist and you think taxes are going to be cheaper in the future, it makes more sense to defer those taxes at this point in time and wait to take those, distributions when we are in a lower tax bracket in the future. But if we also believe that there's a possibility for taxes to be higher in the future, it makes more sense to get those assets into some of those tax-free assets, Roth IRAs and life insurance and so forth, that we can, pull assets out later on a tax-free status.
Mhm.
So, it's that planning that goes in, ahead of time when you have the time to be able to do it, rather than waiting until the last minute when, now all of a sudden it's at your, retirement's at your doorsteps, or required minimum distributions, is coming up next year, and you don't have the time to
Right.
be able to do that planning anymore. Now it's got to
Mhm.
be a little bit more aggressive. If you do it in the present time, you're going to have much more time. You can make it, more relaxed, and have a longer period to be able to get different assets into some of those tax-free
Mhm.
buckets.
And then last, you need to determine if you want to leave anything behind. And if so, a financial advisor can help you with legacy planning.
Yeah. So, maybe throughout your lifetime, you've been tied closely to a charity, or you want, your parents gave you something, and it's a goal of yours to make sure that you're giving it to your kids, or you want to spend every dollar that you have, and the last one bounces to the undertaker. However your plan is, you want to make sure it goes the way you want it to happen. Okay. So setting up those plans early. And, for example, on the first one, with if we're going to do a bunch of Roth conversions, but then you want to give the money to charity later, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be paying the taxes now and then have the charity inherit it tax free. When, if they are a qualified charity, they can inherit those IRA dollars tax free.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're getting these buckets set up correctly, and the ultimate goal of where you want that money to go has got to be determined um, early on. But there's also the sense of changing your mind later on too, that hey, maybe I don't want to give it to charity, or maybe I don't want to give it to my kids, and I want it to go to the opposite. You have the ability to do that type of stuff when you're
Right.
diversifying these
Mhm.
assets.
Really good points, Nick. And talking it through makes it so much more clear why there is no cookie cutter answer for this. So, if somebody wants to talk through these prompts with you, then to come to their own unique number, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so they can reach out to us online, icanberryretirement.com. You can schedule an appointment right there on our website to sit down with either Luke or myself and discuss these. They can also give us a call, 937-498-1128, and set up an appointment as well to discuss these important pieces. So
Absolutely. Nick, thank you.
thanks, Erin.